They say beauty comes at a price. But what if that price was human blood? In the heart of medieval Europe, whispers spread of a queen whose mirror never cracked, whose skin never aged, and whose beauty seemed carved from eternity itself. But behind the candlelit halls of her castle, a darker truth dripped from the stone floors, a secret so horrific it has haunted legends for centuries. Tonight, we uncover the story of the queen who turned vanity into murder. Terror. Before we descend deeper into her blood-soaked chambers. I want to ask you something. Do you believe that legends like these are exaggerated? Or do you think history truly hides monsters in royal crowns? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear will change how you look at the idea of beauty forever. The groan of iron lingers long after the door is shut, as though the walls themselves have absorbed centuries of laments. Cold breath coils from the stones, damp with age, carrying the taste of mildew and rust. A torch hisses faintly in its sconce, its flames struggling against the draft that snakes through the corridor. Shadows sway across the vaulting, like phantoms summoned to bear witness to her last night upon this earth. Somewhere in the dark belly of the prison, water drips steady, eternal, like a clock that measures not hours but heartbeats. She kneels, a lone figure swallowed by the silence, her cloak spreading across the stones in a dark tide. The beads of her rosary are bone, pale against her trembling fingers, each one polished smooth by desperate prayers, whispered into an indifferent heaven. Her voice falters in Latin, a tongue of churchmen and scholars, but her thoughts rebel, straying into memory. She hears laughter ringing through the halls of a palace, sees velvet banners unfurling from carved beams, the glow of candles gilding silver goblets brimming with wine. The air was once heavy with roasted meats and the perfume of violets, courtiers bowing, music rising from lutes and vials. That world feels not only lost, but cruelly imagined, as if some dream had been lent to her only to be revoked. Now she listens instead to the gnawing of rats in the straw, the shuffle of a jailer's boots when keys rattle in iron locks. Catches on the manacles at her ankles, each link glinting like a fragment of broken crown. Once she reached for diadems and jewels, believing love could crown her queen. But the embrace of power is colder than the stone against her knees. Love has curdled into accusation, into betrayal dressed in the language of law. The same lips that once swore devotion have spoken her doom before council and court. And the verdict echoes more cruelly than any sermon. Above her, bells toll, the hour of vespers, their mournful clang descending into the bowels of the prison. She bows her head, hearing in their hollow resonance a dirge rehearsed in advance. The world outside feasts and flatters, whispering of heirs, alliances. In the shifting tides of favor, while she is reduced to a silence measured by drips of water and the restless wings of a bird trapped behind beams. The kingdom does not pause for her sorrow. It moves on, indifferent, as if her life were already erased, breath already stilled. She pictures the scaffold awaiting her in the courtyard, timbers rough, smelling of resin and blood. At dawn, light will glint upon the axe's edge, a cruel mirror catching the first fire of morning. She imagines the sky framed between beams, blue and boundless, the last image her eyes will drink. A shiver travels her body, part fear, part surrender, and she lowers her brow to her clasped hands. Her whisper is not for mercy, she has abandoned that hope but for remembrance. Let not her blood vanish into the soil as though it were nothing. Let someone recall her voice, her smile, her fall. The torch crackles low, its flame guttering as though it too prepares to die. In the moment before silence reclaims the cell, she breathes a prayer that her story might outlive the scaffold, that her name might not be erased entirely from the world she once walked with such fragile grace. And in that prayer, there is not triumph nor defiance, but a quiet defiance of erasure, the plea that suffering itself might carve memory into stone. The drip of water continues. The bells fall quiet. Darkness presses closer, and in it her. Spirit waits for the dawn, for the axe, for the sky that will receive her final gaze. Yet beyond her walls, unseen, the court stirs restlessly, shifting toward its next intrigue, its next bride, its next sacrifice to the hunger of a king. The story does not end with her silence, it only deepens as another veil is lifted, and another life is drawn toward the same inexorable fate. The banquet hall shimmers with false warmth, each candle flame fluttering against the vaulted ceilings like restless souls caught in waxen cages. Shadows of dancers twist and writhe along the walls, grotesque echoes of their silken grace. Scent of roasted swan, rich with fat, mingles with spiced hippocras poured from golden flagons, the sweetness cloying as though it might choke. Laughter cracks like splintered wood, sharp and hollow, bouncing between carved beams and painted. Saints whose painted eyes never close. At the heart of this revelry sits a queen, crowned in gold yet bound in silence. The circlet weighs upon her brow like iron, its pressure reminding her of the chain it has become. Her lips curl into a smile practiced too often, each gesture shaped by duty more than delight. She tilts her head toward the king, answering his jest with a polite nod, though inside her pulse stammers against her throat like a bird against the bars of its cage. Beneath the gleam of jewels, her hand quivers upon the rim of her goblet, fingertips pressing against garnets, as though clinging to fragments of certainty. She recalls the vows once spoken in honeyed tones, promises of eternity, of honor, of love, woven into divine sanction. Yet eternity proves fragile, shifting in his eyes as swiftly as candlelight disturbed by a draught. Whispers slip like knives through the corridors beyond this hall, that the king's gaze wanders, that his hunger for an heir devours patience, that her youth and beauty may no longer shield her. Her sisters murmur warnings, veiling them in prayer and embroidery, while her ladies bow their heads in silence, eyes lowered as though fearing the gallows for their very thoughts. No voice dares rise above the music, yet the air itself trembles. With the knowledge that her crown may already be marked for removal, the lutes pluck, the drums strike, and each note feels like derision, a mockery of her unease. The melody that sweeps dancers into circles only deepens her solitude, for she cannot move with them, cannot breathe freely beneath the veil of duty. The roses embroidered upon her gown, stitched in scarlet thread by hands long gone to dust, suddenly seem less like blossoms of triumph and more like wounds waiting to bloom. Her fingers trace the petals, feeling each thorn hidden in silk, in the flicker of firelight. A vision overwhelms her sudden, sharp, unbearable. She sees herself without crown or jewel, stripped bare of station, her feet stumbling across a gray courtyard slick with rain. She hears the hush of a crowd, once jubilant at her coronation, now watching as though struck dumb by their own complicity. The scaffold looms, beams dark with dampness, the blade gleaming pale as dawn. Above, the wings of crows beat the air, their cries slicing through the silence like the toll of a bell. She feels the bite of cold iron, the roughness of rope against skin, and then nothing but sky, vast and merciless. Swallowing her last breath, the vision fractures, dissolves into laughter, his laughter, thunderous, booming, filling every corner of the hall. She raises her eyes to the king, to the man whose word is law, whose glance is judgment, whose smile conceals the machinery of her fate. His face shines with indulgence, his hand heavy upon the arm of his throne, but beneath the revelry she wonders, does he know already? Has her sentence been sealed in chambers unseen, parchment signed, whispers turned into decrees? Or does he relish the suspense, the exquisite torment of a flower watching its own stem being cut? The hall swells with noise. The dancers whirl faster, the goblets spill, yet to her, the room feels entombed, a crypt painted in gold and flame. The tapestries above hang heavy, their threads depicting saints in martyrdom, serene faces gazing upward as blades pierce, as fires consume, as ropes tighten around necks. Their calm eyes seem to mock her, to remind her that beauty and youth are no armor against the will of a king. She studies their woven expressions, wondering if she too will be remembered not as a queen, not as a wife, but as another offering to the altar of power. Her smile does not falter. It lingers across her lips like a veil, concealing fear, concealing knowledge, concealing the silence that is all she has left. She sips the wine, bitter despite its spice, and tastes in it the metallic temps of fate. The hall roars with festivity, yet within her chest there is only the slow beat of dread, steady as the toll of distant bells. And beyond the hall, beyond the gold, the silks, the laughter shadows stir. Another woman waits her turn. Another crown is being shaped. The wheel continues its cruel rotation, and somewhere unseen, another thread is already fraying. Frost clings to the window panes, its fragile lacework trembling in the breath of dawn. Beyond the river Thames lies wrapped in mist, the city hushed beneath winter's hand. Inside the palace, life stirs reluctantly, whispers of servants moving. Across flagstones, the muted crackle of a hearth urged back to life, and from behind carved doors, the plaintive cries of a child, on a bed strewn with linens damp from labor. The queen lies pale, her body spent, her hair clinging wet to her temples like strands of mourning cloth. Her lips move in prayer, the words faint, fragile, dissolving into the chill of the chamber. Hours of agony have torn through her, but she has brought forth what the king demanded, an heir, a vessel of hope. And yet, as she gazes down into her arms, she finds not the triumph the court craved, but a daughter. The girl blinks at the new world with eyes untouched by sorrow, her lungs announcing themselves in soft, insistent cries. Her skin is warm against her mother's chest, her breath tinged with the sweetness of milk and first beginnings. But in the silence that follows, a different weight descends. A boy would have been salvation, a fortress against suspicion, a chain-binding crown to womb. Instead, the midwives avert their eyes, their polite smiles fragile as ice ready to crack. Their silence is louder than any pronouncement. Carrying the verdict of a kingdom, disappointment, the queen draws her daughter closer, pressing her cheek against downy skin, inhaling the scent of life new and unmarked. Terror coils within her, like a serpent, for she knows how swiftly joy can curdle into danger. Outside her chamber, a herald rehearses the words he longs to cry, to the courtwards he may never be permitted to speak. For what the realm demands is not innocence, not softness, but a son who might grow into sword and shield. Her thoughts stumble back to the night of her wedding, 2 banners unfurled in gold, 2 vows sworn before God and man, 2 promises that rang with eternity. How hollow they seem now, echoing against the cold walls of this chamber, hollow as an empty chalice. She clutches the child closer, as if love itself might become armor, but even love here is a fragile shield. Then comes the sound. She dreads footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate. Each one pressing against the stone like judgment itself descending. The king approaches. She steels herself, though her body trembles beneath the weight of expectation and exhaustion. The door opens, heavy on its hinges, and the air thickens. Its presence is shadow before it is speech, authority before it is glance. She feels him studying her, measuring not her suffering, not her courage, but the bundle in her arms. Will he see what she sees? A miracle of flesh and breath, a child knit in secret, now placed in their hands by the mercy of heaven. Or will his eyes turn cold, beholding only the absence of a son, the emptiness of ambition denied? She dares not speak, dares not plead. All her heart can offer is pressed against her breast, a tiny hand curling, instinctive, a promise in miniature. The baby stirs, as if sensing the storm. Her fist unfurls, delicate, reaching for the air as though claiming her place in a world already poised to reject her. Tears slip from the queen's eyes, tracing the curve of her face, falling onto the swaddling cloth. They darken the linen. Mingling with the warmth of the infant, a baptism of sorrow and defiance. From the chapel below, bells begin to toll. Their notes rise through the cold corridors, not triumphant, not jubilant, but hollow, mourning the child's first breath as though it were already a failure. The sound presses against her chest until she feels her heartbeat falter, each toll a reminder that she is no longer secure, that her crown, once a coronet of triumph, now rests upon her head like an executioner's hood. She turns her gaze to the window. Beyond the frost-clouded glass, Ravens gather along the roofs, black wings restless in the morning air, their silhouettes pierce the dawn, omens etched against the paling sky. She knows what they foretell. Already, her place at court trembles. Already, her worth is being rewritten in corridors where she cannot tread. The child she holds may prove her salvation or her ruin. But in this moment, she feels only the cold certainty that history has placed a mark upon them both. Yet in the silence between the bell tolls, there is a pause, a breath of stillness, where fear loosens its grip. She lowers her lips to her daughter's brow, kissing the warmth that no decree can erase. There in that fleeting touch, she imagines defiance, that perhaps against the iron of kings and the cruelty of succession, love might still carve a place to endure. The footsteps of the king recede, leaving her with the weight of his silence. The chamber darkens, though the dawn has risen. She lies back, her child upon her breast, whispering not for triumph, not for pardon, but for endurance. And as the ravens stir upon the palace roofs, their wings beating against the frozen air, the queen clings to the fragile warmth in her arms. She knows that the world beyond the chamber already writes her fate in ink as black as their feathers. But for now, she holds her daughter as if holding back the tide itself, whispering into the fragile dawn, "You are not my failure. You are my vow." Rain hammers against the leaded glass, each strike sharp as a nail driven into a coffin lid. The storm coils around the tower, its howls mingling with the low groan of the wind through arrow slits. Inside, the chamber is dim, the air heavy with damp velvet and the ache of dread. Queen paces, her gown dragging like a chain across the stones, her face pale as wax, her breath shallow beneath the weight of accusation. Upon the table lie the letters. Sheets of parchment, creased and stained, their ink black with betrayal. Their seals still clinging with the authority of liars. She knows these hands, their calligraphy too perfect to be innocent, their wax too heavy to be trusted. Courtiers, who once bent their spines in flattery, have now bent their words into daggers. Each line drips with venom, whispering of treachery, whispering of infidelity. Lies penned with deliberate cruelty, carried to the king's ear like offerings to a god grown restless with boredom. Once she was light itself, laughter, trailing through the court like music, eyes following her, as if she carried the very sun in her smile. The king's gaze, once tender, once burning, had crowned her brighter than any jewel. Now that gaze is clouded, poisoned, turned against her. No plea, no denial, no truth can pierce the armor of suspicion. She has been declared guilty before. Her lips could form the word innocent. She stops pacing, her palm pressing to the wall. Cold and slick with the sweat of rain seeping through ancient stone. The damp clings to her skin like judgment itself. Somewhere below, she hears the stamp of restless horses, the clang of steel drawn against whetstone. Guards sharpen blades not for battle but for theater, the theater of her ruin. Her mind drifts to the faces of her children, their smiles soft as dawn, their voices thin and bright like birdsong. Will she see them again? Or will they be raised in shadows, their names carved into a legacy poisoned by whispers? The thought tears at her, more cruelly than any blade could. In the corner, the crucifix glimmers weakly, candlelight trembling upon the figure of Christ. She gazes at it, searching for solace, searching for an answer. But silence meets her prayers. Silence thick as the moat outside, silence deep as the grave being dug for her name. Does heaven itself turn away when kings demand blood? Or is the silence its own answer, that suffering is the crown of the faithful? A gust of wind finds its way through the slit in the stone, extinguishing the flame. The chamber shudders into half-darkness. She inhales sharply, her sobs betraying her solitude, her breath ragged in the hollow quiet. Shadows lean against her like jailers. She lowers herself to the floor, gathering the scattered letters into her lap. A rustle like dry leaves, fragile, false. With trembling hands, she rips them apart, tearing wax and lies, shredding the accusations that will outlive her. The fragments scatter across the stones, white against the gloom, feathers torn from a bird that once dared to fly. She knows. The truth will not matter. They will say she confessed. They will say she betrayed. They will carve her story into the stone of history. History will not care if it is written in falsehood. Outside, the storm weakens, the rain subsiding into a whisper. But in its place rises the toll of bells, slow, heavy, echoing from the chapel. Bells meant to call souls to prayer, now pressing upon her as if tolling already for her death. Each strike reverberates through her ribs, a countdown carved into sound. She kneels upon the cold floor, her gown pooling around her like a shroud. Her lips form a prayer, but not for salvation, not for rescue. She prays for strength, for the steel within her heart to match the steel that waits to end her. She prays for her eyes not to falter when the crowd gathers, when the axe is raised. She prays that her silence might thunder louder than their lies if the king demands her death. Let him take it, but let him also carry its weight into eternity. Let his laughter, his triumph, his feasts, all be haunted by the memory of her gaze broken, unyielding as the blade descended. And in that dim chamber, with scraps of parchment like snow across, the stones and the toll of bells pouring through the rain-soaked air, the queen closes her eyes. She is already half gone. But she will not bow her head. Not yet. For though her body will fall, her silence will remain a silence sharp as glass. Eternal as the storm, waiting to speak in the mouths of those who come after her. At dawn, the gardens glisten, their roses jeweled with dew, their fragrance sweet enough to disguise the rot of betrayal that seeps through palace walls. The air is thick with rosemary and thyme, herbs planted long ago as charms against the plague, as if any root or blossom could guard against the greater pestilence, suspicion, rejection, the hunger of a king's wandering eye. The queen moves among the hedges, velvet brushing against damp earth, attendants shadowing her at a careful distance. She walks as though she is already a ghost, present yet untouchable. A figure watched but no longer adored. The sparrows sense it before the courtiers do. One bursts suddenly from the hedgerow, its wings drumming against the silence like a hidden alarm. She halts, breath caught in her throat, her hand resting upon the marble rim of the fountain. The water rises, spills, falls again. A circle without end, yet each drop whispers of time sliding away, of a future she no longer owns. Its rhythm mocks her. It's a song of constancy, in a world where constancy has no value. The whispers follow her even here. Hidden within the rustle of leaves, caught in the flicker of glances from servants who know too much, yet dare say nothing. Annulment, disgrace, replacement. Words sharp as knives passed from mouth to mouth in candlelit chambers. Oh. She has given her youth, her loyalty, her prayers. Yet the tally of her worth has been reduced to a single, unyielding failure. No son to carry the name. Years of devotion weigh nothing against the glitter of a younger face. The promise of another womb. Her thoughts drift across the sea, to the halls of her father, where stone walls echoed with the voices of her childhood. The cadence of her mother, tongue now half forgotten in this foreign land, rises in her memory like a hymn from another life. She feels the ache of exile as though it were a chain about her ribs, tightening with each breath. She has been queen, but she has also been stranger, her laughter translated. Her customs altered, her identity stitched into someone else's. Tapestry. A figure approaches across the gravel walk, boots crunching softly. The messenger bows, his eyes lowered, his hands trembling as he extends the letter sealed in crimson wax. She does not need to touch it to know its meaning. The seal might as well be a blade. The garden tilts, roses blurring into crimson drops. Against the grass, as though the earth itself is bleeding for her, still she does not falter. She straightens her spine, lifts her chin, the weight of her crown invisible yet unbroken upon her head. Despair claws at her chest, but she forces it down, burying it beneath the dignity of her birth. They may strip her of her title, her chamber, her place at the king's side, but they will not strip her of her bearing. She is still her father's daughter, still carved from the blood of warriors and saints, the fountain murmurs on, relentless, cruel. Its song is not comfort, but mockery. A ceaseless reminder that time flows forward, whether her prayers are answered or silenced. Around her, the roses bow in the breeze, petals trembling as though in mourning, as though they too understand that she is not merely a queen, but a monument already being dismantled. Stone by stone, petal by petal, she turns back toward the palace. Each step is deliberate, slow, as though carved in ritual. The hem of her gown brushes the damp earth, soaking up the sorrow of the soil. Behind those walls, ink dries upon parchment, signatures bloom like wounds, and her fate is already sealed. She will not be remembered as a partner, as a queen beloved, but as a caution, a shadow. A name footnoted at the edge of power. The roses bend their heads as she passes, their scarlet blossoms nodding in the wind. Alive yet already buried, she walks with the silence of one condemned, each step carrying her closer to erasure, closer to the next act of a history written by others. And the fountain sings on merciless, its endless water eroding stone, eroding memory till only silence remains. Night descends like a shroud, pressing heavily upon the castle walls, smothering even the faint glow of the moon.
Ow.
Its towers loom as silhouettes against the ink-black sky, their stones soaked in centuries of rain, war, and whispered secrets. Within, the air is damp, the corridors narrow, every step haunted by echoes too ancient to name. Torches sputter in iron brackets, their flames wavering, coughing smoke upward into the vaulted dark. Shadows writhe upon the walls, growing and retreating with each flicker, as if the castle itself breathes an uneasy rhythm. The silence is not pure silence. It is pierced by the slow drip of water, falling through cracks in the stone. Each drop lands with the weight of footsteps, deliberate, measured, inexorably, as though time itself is pacing toward judgment. Oh, beneath this rhythm, the great hall trembles faintly with the muffled roar of laughter, of cups raised high, of toasts to a queen's name. But here, above behind closed doors, another ritual unfolds. Her chamber is cloaked in velvet, red as fresh wounds. The walls hang heavy with tapestries, threads depicting saints, battles, martyrdoms. Yet their woven eyes avert themselves, unwilling to bear witness. They turn silently to the floor, to the dark, anywhere but to the sight before them. In the center of the room rests a copper basin. Steam rises faintly from within, curling upward like ghostly fingers. The scent is undeniable, sharp, cloying. The air itself tastes of iron. At the edge of the light, her attendants wait. Servants, shadows more than people. Their heads bowed, hands folded in mute obedience. They do not look at her. They dare not. Their silence is part reverence, part fear. For they are witnesses, yet not confessors. Their loyalty is bound by duty, but their hearts beat fast with the knowledge of what they serve. She steps forward, her jewels clinking with the fragile sound of chains. The brocade of her gown sweeps across the rushes, dragging whispers of gold thread and dust. Her hand extends, fingers pale against the copper basin, tracing its rim with slow precision, as though caressing the threshold between mortality and eternity. Her touch lingers there on the cusp of a choice that is not a choice at all, but a vow she has long since sealed. The fabric falls from her shoulders, sliding soundlessly to the floor. The firelight seizes her pale skin, painting it with shadows and flame. For a heartbeat she stands suspended, the last remnant of hesitation in her breath. Then she bends, lowering herself into the basin. The liquid parts around her are rippling, clinging. Its warmth envelops her, thick and unyielding, seeping into every fold of her flesh until she is no longer a woman, but something other, something eternal. Her lips part, not with words, but with a breath that sounds almost like prayer. The servants shift slightly at the edges of the chamber, but none dare move. The queen leans back, eyes closed, lashes trembling with the weight of a secret she cannot speak. To her subjects, she is untouched by time, a miracle of beauty, a vision of agelessness whispered in taverns, in market stalls, in the hushed voices of courtiers who envy and adore. But here in this chamber, the truth bleeds through. The fountain of youth is no spring of crystal water, no divine blessing. It is written instead in crimson shadows, in ritual, in silence. The basin holds her as though it were a womb, cradling her rebirth, and for a fleeting moment she believes that she has conquered the passing of hours, that she is captured forever, yet forever is never still. Outside, the castle stirs. Bells toll faintly in the chapel tower, the sound drifting up through stone and smoke, mingling with the faint laughter of courtiers below. The queen's eyes flutter open, and in their reflection, the torchlight dances strangely, beauty and terror woven together. She exhales, and the steam rises around her face like incense at a funeral mass. Somewhere deep in the castle's heart, a door closes. Lock slides into place. Chains rattle in the dark. The sound carries faintly upward, unnoticed by the revelers, unheard by the servants, but carried nonetheless like a whisper into her chamber. It brushes against her ear, reminding her that eternity is a fragile bargain, and every secret has its price. The basin stills. The queen reclines in its embrace, as if stone and blood together have crowned her mistress of time. And yet, outside, the night thickens, and a storm gathers on the horizon. Her beauty may endure, but storms are not swayed by faces or by rituals. The chamber grows still, save for the faint dripping of water in the walls. In that echo, in that silence, the question lingers like smoke. How long can flesh deny decay, when even empires crumble to dust?